Good morning everyone and welcome to the School for Health and Care Radicals, Module 4, Making Change Happen. I'm going to hand over now to Jackie Linton who is going to take us through the start of the module. So Jackie, hope you're there.
Good morning everybody. Can you hear me okay? Okay, I'd like to give a really warm welcome to the School for Health and Care Radicals, to Module 4, Making Change Happen. My name is Jackie Linton and I'm going to be your chair for today. I'm part of the NHS Horizons group and also a part of the School for Health and Care Radicals. So we'll go on to our next slide. So this may be very familiar to many of you. It's one of our slides on the NHS Change Day site, and the School for Health and Care Radicals is very much a part of NHS Change Day. We just have a week to go from Monday, and NHS Change Day is all about how we can make a difference and how we can think about change in a different way. And I'd really like to encourage you to go onto the website and get really familiar, if you haven't already, with Change Day. And if you haven't made a pledge, that would be great as well. And so the school is really about helping change agents, helping change makers, helping frontline staff and anybody who wants to be involved in making a change, whether it's big or small. So please do get involved. And we're going to go to our next slide now. So one of the things that's really helpful as we go through our WebEx today and as we go through our module is to really get engaged in the chat and in Twitter and all the kind of different forums. So I'm just going to take you through the 4 ways that you can get involved today. The first one is using the chat box on the WebEx. And that will be used throughout the whole seminar today. So as many comments and as many suggestions or ideas that you've got would be absolutely great. The second way is if you're on Twitter, you can use the NHS Change Day hashtag or the School for Health and Care Radicals chat hashtag as well, which is SHCR chat. We will also be producing the module in a Storify, and it will be on Pinterest, and we'll put these on the website as well. And there is another way that you can get engaged. If you go onto the website at changeday.nhs.uk and go into the School for Healthcare Radicals, which is on the top menu bar, you can also use the chat on there as well, and that is a live chat. So there are, lots of different ways that you can get engaged today, and we'd really like to encourage you to use all of them. So just to take you through then our modules, so the first one that we had was all about change starts with me, and what that means in terms of you as a change agent or as a change maker or just someone who wants to make a difference. The second one was all about building communities and building alliances for change. The third one was last week was all about rolling with resistance. This week it's all about making change happen, the really practical aspects of making change happen. So we're really looking forward to our session today. And then next week we will be moving beyond the edge, a really exciting finish just days before Change Day. So we just wanted to bring you up to date really with some of the stats that we've got, or some of the breadth and depth of people who are really engaged in this whole process. So we've got over 1,300 learners that have joined up to the school. There's been 8,000 slide shares. The study guide has been well used and viewed by at least 1,000 people. Our tweet chats have given us over 4,500 tweets, and so our potential reach is 6.5 million people. So We're absolutely delighted with the spread and how many people have got engaged. And I'd like to hand you over now. Let's get straight into Module 4, Making Change Happen. And I'd like to hand you over to Helen Bevan, who's going to take us through our module today. Thank you.
Hi, this is Helen Bevan, and I'd like to, as Jackie says, I'd like you to take you through our agenda for today. So, our theme today is around making change happen, and you know, a big theme so far in the School for Health and Care Radicals has been about how change and how we operate as change agents is as much to do with how we think about change and our mindset as it is to do with the way that we go about change. And that is as much true when it comes to making change happen as it is to any other aspect of change. So the themes that we're going to talk about today is, first of all, talking about why so many change efforts fail to achieve their objectives or deliver their benefits, and what we can learn from some of that. We want to talk specifically about leading large-scale change, and we want to bring you into one of the key models that we like to use, which is the NHS Change model, which brings together intrinsic and extrinsic motivators for change. We're then going to pause, and Liz, our colleague from the faculty, is going to take us through a discussion on intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. Then the second half of the webinar, we're going to talk about building energy for change, because the evidence base shows us that energy is such a key topic. We're going to talk about shared purpose, and then finally, Jenny from our faculty is going to lead a panel with a couple of members of the School for Health and Care Radicals to talk about some of these issues, to talk about energy for change and creating shared purpose. So let's begin. So, you know, when we look at the literature, it's pretty consistent. Again and again, we see studies and we see reports that tell us that most change, particularly change that is large in scale and complexity, often doesn't fully deliver its objectives. And you know what's interesting is if you actually go back and you see what was being written 20 years ago, and you see what's being written now, that figure's pretty consistent. It doesn't seem to have changed at all. So to illustrate this point, I'm using a study here that was carried out by McKinsey. It's Performance Transformation Survey, which was 3,000 respondents from many different sectors and industries. And again, what this showed was only about 25% of change efforts, as reported by respondents, got anywhere near achieving the change and delivering the benefits. And when it came to the kind of change or the kind of change effort that was able to fully deliver, sustain the change and move on to a new level of change, it's probably nearer to 5%. So I guess the question for us as Health and Care Radicals is, what does it take, or what are some of the things that we need to be thinking about to at least be in that 25%? And again, I think it comes back to this mindset issue. So I think, too often in health and care, when we're thinking about our plans for change, we think about, oh, this is the goal we need to achieve, and we create a program plan, and we set objectives, and we think about the resources, and we plan the risks, but we kind of see it as a path that we need to go up. But, what's the reality? I think that the reality of change is far more complex, and we have our ups and downs, and things work and they don't, and change is very emergent because we're working in complex adaptive systems. So I think what this is telling us is that we need to plan our change for the inevitability of emergent and ongoing learning and so on. And I like this quote from Peter Fuda, again in the context of this 70% figure that, you know, in terms of change efforts that don't achieve their objectives. And he says, it's our contention that most change efforts are built upon the shaky foundation of 5 flawed assumptions, okay? Assumptions, again, mindset, you know, the way we think. First of all, that we can actually manage change. Secondly, that the way that human beings go about change is a kind of objective, rational way. Thirdly, that change is a kind of step-by-step process. Fourthly, that our starting point for change is a neutral one that doesn't evolve emotion. And finally, that change itself is the goal. And I think one of the ways that Peter Fuda talks about this, he says, change is not the goal is the goal. So, and I think often as change agents we forget that, you know, I am leading this change. Well, actually, it's not the change that matters. It's what we're trying to achieve for our patients and our communities and citizens that count. So I think that's a pretty good summing up of some of the issues. And one of the things that we sent you this week was a copy, an electronic copy of our book, Leading Large-Scale Change, A Practical Guide. And I think there are some real nuggets in this book about large-scale change. And as part of this, our team that put together this practical guide to leading large-scale change looked across the world at many different sectors around what is the reality of large-scale change. And we looked at the education sector, the government sector, we looked at industry, we looked at third sector, as well as health and care. And what was interesting was that the results were pretty consistent across, across the board. And the reality of large-scale change was that the thing that was most likely to happen, okay, was the thing that we least wanted to happen. And conversely, the thing that is least likely to happen is what we're trying to do. So the thing that is least likely to happen is that we achieve our goals and the change becomes well established, that across the system, lots of different levels of change happen, and the change is sustained, and the change can be accommodated. And the reality is that most large-scale change efforts, the scenario is one where the change effort, it may start quite well, but effectively it runs out of energy, it fizzles out, it fades away. And you get a sense there why we think this energy issue is so important. And another factor, okay, is as leaders, and whether we're organisational leaders with a senior role, in the structure, or we're leaders of change, we're change agents, we are signal generators, and we are sending out messages all the time about what's important and what counts. And I like the work that Charles O'Reilly from Stanford does, and he says, as a leader, and I'd also say as a change agent, we have to think of ourselves as signal generators, and our words and action are constantly being scrutinised and interpreted, particularly by those below you in a hierarchical sense. And I think that what we see is that our words and our actions are massively amplified, far more than we think they are. Okay, so and people are hanging on to those signals, and if we do it well, okay, we actually can reduce uncertainty and ambiguity about what is important and how to act. And what I thought I'd do is to contrast that with a recent study that was carried out by Gallup on change efforts. And basically what they did was that they looked at how many priorities and how many messages were being sent out to people in a range of different kinds of organisations. And what they saw was the people at the top of the organisation maybe had a very small number of priorities, but that as we went through the layers, the number of messages that people are hearing, particularly at the front line, are increasing as that information gets cascaded down the organisation. So often, people at the front line are hearing multiple priorities, okay? And it makes it very, very difficult for people to know exactly what to focus on. And then I found this other recent article, which again, I've put in the study guide, from Tara Palak, again, about why many change efforts fail. And she says, typically around any change effort, there's an initial spike of tangible energy and change. But when leaders lose interest or they move on to other priorities, the momentum of change slows down drastically. So if you think, between those 3 studies, between what we saw in the Practical Guide to Large-Scale Change, the Gallup study, and this one, you get a real sense of, complex change that is very, very difficult to sustain. So, thinking more positively about how we make large-scale change happen. One of the things that we did as part of our Leading Large-Scale Change program was to identify what are the things that we see time and time again in successful large-scale change efforts. And what I've done here, I've synthesized them into 10, I think, very key points. And just going through these, thinking back to the previous 3 modules from the School for Health and Care Radicals, you'll see lots of themes that we're familiar with. So the first is that what leaders are able to create is a new vision, okay, a sense of shared purpose, what we're trying to achieve. And it's being framed in a way that makes it better and fundamentally different from the status quo. So actually we create an attraction for people to move to a different future. Secondly, identifying and communicating big themes. Okay, but they're themes that people can relate to and make a connection with on an emotional basis as well as a rational one, and things that will make a big difference. What we see in successful large-scale change efforts are many multiples of things. So it's not just like one big change effort. There's lots of different things happening at the same time, lots. Fourthly, framing. We talked about this in Module 2. Very important. We're framing the issues in a way that will engage and capture the imagination, the energy, the attention, the motivation of a lot of different people. Okay? And again, we talked about a weak tie strategy, whereby we talked about that in week 2, whereby we're able to frame messages that will unite a lot of people around common causes. And we're doing this, by doing this, we're creating a shift in the balance of power, and we're distributing the leadership. So it's not just a few leaders, but many leaders. And number 5 is about how can we create changes that are mutually reinforcing across lots of different processes and subsystems. And I want to come on to that shortly when we talk about the change model, because, we've got to kind of think about the whole situation and creating lots of different changes at the same time, and we've got a model to help us think about doing that. Okay. Number 6 is about the story, but it's not just about having a narrative or a story at the beginning of the change process. It's about continually refreshing that. And again, when I think in the NHS about many of our efforts about cost and quality improvement, I think back to kind of 2010, 2011, there were some really good stories and narratives about why we needed to focus on cost and quality and to seek to make better use of resources through quality. And there were lots of kind of stories and narratives and call to actions going on. But I think we've lost some of that story. We haven't continually refreshed it. And part of the problem is that if we don't keep refreshing the story and making it relevant to people, then other people will tell different stories that we don't necessarily like. Okay? Number 7 is about emergence, the planning and the design of the change. We have to keep constantly rethinking it. We need to monitor progress. We need to be measuring, absolutely, but we need to be building and learning processes where we're constantly saying, are we going in the right direction? Do things need to change? So that's very much been a feature of the School for Health and Care Radicals, because what we've found is that many of the people that are taking part in the WebExes and contributing fantastically are very experienced change agents. So in a sense, what we've had to do is emergently, we've had to up our game and create better, more leading edge content because of who is taking part in the school, and that's been a fantastic thing to do. Okay? Number 8, lots of people contribute to the leadership of change. It's not just people hierarchically. And we talked in module number 1 about needing to work with the levers that the hierarchy give us and to build networks, get many people involved. We talked about many change agents, not just a few, the new work of John Cotter. That is absolutely shown in this literature. Number 9, it's been a big theme through all of our modules about transforming mindsets. It's not enough to just take different actions. We have to think in fundamentally different ways. And number 10 is about energy. How do we maintain and refresh the energy of our leaders and our change agents over the long haul so that our change doesn't fizzle out? So, I think it's really important when we're planning to make change happen, okay, we need to think about motivators for change, because if change is going to happen, we've got to motivate people to change. And it's critical, I think, that we think deeply about intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation and how we work with both. And there's a very, very big very big literature base about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. A lot of it is in the field of education, and a lot of it is in the field of sports and coaching. And if we think about it, intrinsic motivation is when people engage in the activity and, in our context, the change, because it creates pleasure for us. It satisfies us. We feel that we're part of something important. And the thing about when people work with intrinsic motivation, it evokes many positive behaviours. So we want to create as much intrinsic motivation around our change as we possibly can. But we also need extrinsic motivation. And extrinsic motivation is people will engage in the activity because of what is happening in their bigger world. There are rewards if we do certain things, or we want to avoid punishment. And in our context here, any influence external to the person, okay, we'll refer to as extrinsic motivation. And what we need to think about is the relationship between the two. So let's think about our efforts as agents of change. So obviously we want to work with extrinsic motivators because we know that by building intrinsic motivation for change, we will create energy and creativity. So the kind of things that we want to be doing and the kind of actions are about connecting to a bigger shared purpose. We want to do the kind of things we talked about in modules 2 and 3, engaging, mobilizing people, calling them to action, understanding where people are, understanding what their interests are and getting them engaged, and the kind of motivational leadership that leads to large-scale change. But we also know that intrinsic motivation isn't enough. And certainly when I've worked in change processes where we've been very focused on intrinsic motivation and not on extrinsic, what we often get is what I'd call 1,000 flowers blooming, where you've got lots of little change programs and processes happening all over the place, which are great, but they don't add up to big change. And in a sense, it's not enough. So we also need to think about how we can utilize as change agents the extrinsic motivators, the things that we can put, or the levers that we can use in our organizations and systems that give us focus and momentum for delivery. And here we're talking about, system drivers, how mechanisms that we put in that drive certain behaviors in our system that incentivize people to take certain actions. We talk about, payment for quality, payment by results, performance management systems, okay, holding people to account, and the kind of measurement systems that are about accountability. So when we think about the relationship between the two, if we are going to create effective change across an organization or across a department or across a system, we need to work with both. So if we think about the relationship between the two, and we look at particularly what's happened in health and care in the last 15 years, which of these do you think has been most dominant? So do you want to write in the chat box, which of these two has tended to dominate in the way that we've gone about large-scale change in health and care? Yeah, I think we've got a kind of unanimous view here, and it's certainly my view. And what we've seen time and time again is that because so much of our change has been driven by extrinsic motivation and the levers of extrinsic motivation, what it does, it eats up and it kills off the intrinsic. And I just want to show you an example here, because some of the work I'm involved in at the moment is around integrated care and thinking about the integrated care and support pioneers. And you know, just looking generally across the country at how we are approaching integrated care and the kind of ways that we're going about things, I thought this point here that Nick Goodwin was making in his article in the International Journal of Integrated Care was very helpful. He said, you know, what we've got across the country, we've got leaders and managers who are seeking to apply integrated care at scale and pace, okay? And very often what we're seeing people doing is focusing on the extrinsic motivators, you know, the organisational solution, different financial inducements, you know, the factors that are extrinsic. And actually, when it comes to integrated care, he says to over-focus on these factors would be a mistake. And I agree with him. And what we need to think about, he talks about a values-driven approach, and what he's saying there in his article when he talks about a values-driven approach is the kind of approach that enables intrinsic motivation, you know, because it's based on values and it starts with the person for whom we want to provide and support through integrated care, okay? And he said that should be a prerequisite, okay? And I think that's really spot on. And again, back to Peter Fuda, who we talked about earlier, he said, when we think about transformation and radical change, he says it's not a matter of intent, it is a matter of alignment. And again, I think he's absolutely spot on there. And, you know, it's fine to say we have got a transformation plan for our community or a transformation plan for our acute hospital, okay? But having a transformation plan and a transformation strategy or objective isn't enough. Actually, what transformation is about aligning things. And this is why I think the NHS change model can be a very, very helpful framework. And this is a way of thinking about change that has been based on like the last 15 years experience of seeking to create large-scale change in the NHS and synthesizing it into 8 components. And here we have the components. And what the model basically says is, if we're thinking about a change strategy, and this could be at the level of our team or our department, or it could be at the level of a whole organisation or a whole system, okay? It's very important that we think about all 8 of these factors because they've been shown to be important when it comes to making change happen successfully. Now, some of these factors are intrinsic. So we think about leadership for change. We think about building shared purpose. We think about engaging to mobilise. Okay? And some of these factors are extrinsic. So we think about system drivers, you know, the incentive mechanisms, the financial payment systems. We think about the kind of measurement that is about measurement for accountability. And we think about rigorous delivery, which is about having effective performance and programme management systems in place. All of those are really important. There's another 2 that are important. The first is about having an evidence-based quality improvement methodology. Okay? The evidence shows us that those organisations and teams that adopt a specific methodology and stick with it over a period of time will tend to get better outcomes. Interestingly, it doesn't seem to matter what the methodology is. So whether it's Lean or Six Sigma or the Institute for Healthcare Improvement Model for Improvement, it doesn't seem to matter, but what does matter is that it is stuck with over a period of time. And then finally, we have spread of innovation. And what we're talking about here is how we think about spreading change right from the start before we action anything, not seeing it as an afterthought. So what we say here is that when we're thinking about our large-scale change processes or even our departmental change processes, where are we with regard to all 8 of these? And you know what's great about this is that when we've got a team of people who are working on change, what we start to do is to say, you know, which ones appeal to you best and why? And what we want to do is that we don't want, ideally, a change team where everybody focuses on the intrinsic motivators and doesn't focus on the extrinsic, okay? We want to have people in our team that are passionate about improvement methodology and are passionate about spread. So one of the ways that we do this is actually we have a carpet and we get people to stand on the carpet and talk about it. And what we also do is we can analyse in a team how are we doing against each of the 8 components. So here we've got an actual real-life one. It's an asthma pathway project. Okay, just in the chat box, what's your prognosis for this asthma pathway project? What do you reckon? Do you think they will succeed? Okay. No. Need more of a shared purpose. Yeah. Presuming 10 is high. Sorry. 10 is where by that particular component we're doing very well, and 0 or 1 means we're doing badly. Thank you for that. Yeah, so what I'd say about this is I think this is a team that will deliver change, but it might not be the right change. So we've got good leadership engagement, we've got good performance management systems, we're using an improvement method. But we've got no shared purpose, we're not really engaging people, we're not using the advantage that system drivers give us. So one of the things I was going to say is that in the study guide, we've put links to a whole set of really fantastic resources that you can use with regard to the NHS change model, including a whole set of templates and ways of working. So just to finish this up, just a couple of quotes. The first one's from Bob Nelson, and he says, "You get the best effort from others, not by lighting a fire beneath them, but by building a fire within." And I think, a big part of our job as change agents is how we build the fire within. I also think that the fire beneath helps as well. If we want to change things across the whole system, but like Peter Fuda says, what matters is how we align them. And my final slide in this section is a quote from Flashdance, What a Feeling. Take your passion and make it happen. Intrinsic motivation. And again, what the literature tells us is that when people get into a situation of change where what they're doing is like really motivating, then we go into a state that we call flow. Okay, and it's when we're in flow that we're our very best and we make our best work happen. I have had so far with the School for Health and Care Radicals some amazing flow moments, and we're absolutely seeing lots and lots of flow around NHS Change Day, and it's really brilliant to see that. I'm going to stop at this point, and I'm going to hand over to Liz, who is going to lead the discussion. But first of all, what I meant to do is to just hear from our Twitter monitor and our chat monitor about how things are going. So Tony, who's been looking after Twitter, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Thank you, Helen.
Okay, what's happening on Twitter?
Really interesting, actually, that we started off with people saying how much they'd appreciated last week, and then a lot of comments about how blue the sky was, particularly useful for a module about blue sky thinking, I thought, actually. A lovely image from Celine, which was a cartoon showing really that plans, no matter how smooth you think they're going to be, will be bumpy, but actually that keeping your eye on the goal is important, because the goal is still there. The path may be bumpy, but you will get there. And then the other key messages for me were around the need to maintain energy for change, the need to maintain the relevance of the story to change agents, and then actually the need to value intrinsic motivators. As your last slide says, take your passion and make it happen. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And Liz?
Okay, again on chat we've got some technical people, so people helping each other out with the technology just to keep the thing moving, and a lot of signposting again to resources, to TED Talks, and as I say each week, we'll collect all of those, collate them, and they'll be in the study guide so people can all have access to those. In terms of comments and themes, there's a huge theme around the importance of re-energising the front line. A lot of support for the change is not the goal is the goal. People really like that. We've had some children joining us. There's a 6-year-old and a 3-month-old on the session, and there were some nice amusing comments about that. But actually, what a serious note is the real importance of remembering that the earlier we start with our young leaders, the more chance we have of making these changes happen. There was a lot of resonance around this idea of signal generators and amplification, and quite a bit of discussion around the importance of emotional engagement as well. Ongoing theme around the importance of narrative, that's come up again and again and again. And as I say, lots of discussion and comments on the issue of intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, which kind of leads me nicely into our discussion now. So if I just explain how this is going to work, everybody, really do use the chat as much as you can, and at the end of this little section, Pip is going to summarise the themes that are coming out of the chat. Put your hands up if you want to speak as well. We'll be monitoring the participants to see who actually has something that they'd like to share with us all. And to take us through the discussion, I'm joined by a lady called Carol Haig. So hopefully Carol's unmuted. So let me just check in with Carol. Are you there, Carol?
Yes, I am.
Great. Hi, Carol. Thank you very much for joining us. Carol's a trauma nurse by background, but now works as a research lead at Manchester Metropolitan University. And Carol's going to actually just start the discussion with me, and then as you have things to say, please do put your hands up, and we'll unmute you and call you in. So, Carol, you've heard the first part of the module. We're really keen to hear your thoughts on extrinsic motivators. So, how have you built these into your change efforts?
Well, I've been reflecting on my experiences while I've been listening to the presentations and watching people's comments. And I think it's really interesting that although a lot of the change I've been involved in, the motivation has definitely been extrinsic, it's been institution imposed, and I use the word advisedly, but the intrinsic response from the people I was working with meant that we actually found a way of taking control of that and actually managing the intrinsic motivators, which, you know, looking at the slides we've got, are suggested as being somewhat draconian. Sometimes they can eat the intrinsic motivation. People, I noticed on the chat, people were saying, I'm so exhausted by this. But we've actually, over hundreds of years of doing this, found ways to motivate staff to motivate intrinsic values and sort of manage the extrinsic demands in a planned way.
And so talk to me a little bit then about, you know, how do you manage the tension between the two?
Well, one of the things although I've managed change in the clinical area, my job was about promoting more research activity in the department, but you can replace research activity with any sort of care issue that you want to. And one of the ways we've taken control of this is, and it fits in with your dissemination of innovation, is we tell the extrinsic demanders what we're doing. Now that does two things. It means that we can say, this is what you asked us to do, this is how we've interpreted it, this is what we've done, and gosh, look, aren't we brilliant? But it also means that the people that are helping move the change forward, because it starts with the change agent, but you can't always do it on your own, you need your team behind you, get their names out there, they know what they're doing, people can see. So it builds up a motivation and helps to prepare the next generation of change agents, so that if I leave tomorrow, the change will continue. Now, the first thing I did when I was in clinical practice, and we created a big change in how we developed care, was it worked really well. But then when I left, there wasn't enough impetus or enough strength in the staff to keep it going, and we sort of learned from that and went, okay, we have to make sure that any change we get is sustainable and isn't reliant on one person.
Great, thanks very much, Carol. Now I'm going to ask people to put their hands up if they've got any thoughts or comments or anything they'd like to either ask Carol or just add to the conversation. Come on, don't be shy. And if people are putting hands up, I don't know that I can see them, so it might mean the team together to actually unmute people. I can see there's a lot on chat, so is anybody prepared to actually just join in the conversation? Okay, Rebecca, thank you. Rebecca Myers, if we can unmute Rebecca. Rebecca, you might...
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can.
Hello, hi. I suppose I was just responding to some of the chat stuff. One of the things I thought was quite interesting, I think it was a trainee on the WebNex, who was talking about, as a trainee, I have no ability to use extrinsic motivators, which I thought was quite an interesting reflection. But it made me think about the importance of humility as a leader, that actually even if you do have access to extrinsic motivators in terms of formal authority, etc., that actually being able to use those responsibly in a way that wraps those around an alignment with the intrinsic motivation. So picking up from what your previous speaker was saying, that actually if we're clear about our shared purpose about improving the quality of services for our patients, and for me being able to provide value for taxpayers because it is a public sector organisation, that actually that intrinsic motivation, having some extrinsic motivators to wrap around that will help us to move things forward.
Great, thanks very much indeed. Nice comments and nicely made. Thank you, Rebecca. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to say? Alice Cole-King. Hello, Alice. Alice, your hand's up, but I can't see that you're actually on the phone. So you might have to use the chat box. Carol, while we're waiting for these very incredibly shy people to step forward from the chat box, what's your experience? I mean, do you have a story that you can tell of how you've seen somebody change through, you know, from going from some extrinsic motivators to through their own intrinsic motivators and actually change a complete viewpoint on an issue or on a change initiative?
Absolutely. The best example of that is Ray Tallis, which your participants may or may not be aware of who Ray Tallis is. Ray Tallis was a geriatrician, a consultant geriatrician, a very influential man, served as the chair of the ethics committee for the Royal College of Geriatricians, and was vehemently and vocally opposed to the concept of assisted dying for people. And he talked very eloquently about this. He's a very personable speaker and took a lot of opinion with him. However, when he actually removed his emotional response to the topic and started to read about it, look at the research, visit places like Oregon where it's been legal for a number of years now, 10 years or more, he completely changed his viewpoint. So he went from being somebody who was vehemently opposed to this to somebody who now is an extremely useful and well-respected advocate for Dignity in Dying, which is the pressure group that deals with this, and consequently has taken a lot of people with him on that sort of journey. So people and practitioners who were opposed to it are now, at the very least, saying, I'm neutral. And neutrality is really what the pressure group is hoping for. So it's just really interesting to see how one person can do a complete 180 on their viewpoint, but take people with them and make people think more about what they're doing. And I guess that ties in with the intrinsic motivation and being a good change leader. And Tallis himself would say, you know, this isn't about him, it's about the attitude that he has now got and how he manages to convey it and how he makes other people think about the same journey.
Lovely example. Thank you, Carol. Are there any more hands up? Is anybody willing to step up and say, now you've had a little bit of time to reflect?
Yeah.
Oh, Tony's hands up. Tony Sumner. Can we have Tony unmuted?
Hi.
Tony.
Thank you. I thought that was a really interesting piece there from Carol, and what it made me think about was to go back to the intrinsic and extrinsic motivators that we had before, which were resonated so well with people. And I wonder whether there's something around the extrinsic motivators that we feel are actually the result of other people's intrinsic motivators.
Really interesting point, Tony. Carol, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that would I would like to think that would be a natural progression. I would like to think that we would have information about intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, I beg your pardon, and internalise that. I think part of the problem, because I was looking at your slide about system drivers and incentives and measurement of accountability and performance management, is, and I'm probably going to upset people now, but there are people out there doing brilliant, brilliant stuff, and they just don't tell us about it. So people's small-scale intrinsic change never gets inculcated into extrinsic motivation because it's happening in little silos. People aren't publishing their work, they're not talking about their work, they're not disseminating their work widely enough. So it's very difficult for things to sort of move forward in a sort of logical way, because people they don't realise what they're doing is so special. You know, they go, oh, you know, all we've done is change how we've managed meal times. Well, that's massive. Tell people about it. Be proud of what people are doing. And I think there's a fine balance between being not egotistical at the change you've made, but also being too diffident in terms of talking about it. You know, tell people about it, and then we can actually affect the extrinsic motivation agenda so that it becomes more aligned to what we're trying to achieve for patients.
That's a lovely point, Carol. Thank you very much. I see Maxine Craig's got her hand up.
Good morning. I just wanted to add, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're a little bit muffled, Max.
Okay, I just wanted to add 2 points. One is about being kind to people, that our intrinsic motivation does change at different parts of people's lives, and we have to realise that people can't run at 150% all of the time. So allowing for the natural ebb and flow of that is really important in organisational life. And I think similarly I've learned over the years in terms of people sharing their experiences, that for some people that is not their goal, that is not why they do the work, and they don't want to share. So I think we've got to accept sometimes that some people are not motivated by sharing, and try not to be judgmental about expecting people to share, because we can lose them completely.
Okay, thanks very much, Max. I really struggled to hear most of that. So would you mind typing some of that into the chat box for us as well? I'd love to be able to summarise it, but I can't because I struggled to hear it. I'm going to come back to you, Carol, now, just before we move on to the next bit. So just any advice for other change agents on how to align intrinsic and extrinsic motivators?
Wow. I think really for me it is about taking control of the agenda, so that what appears and is sometimes perceived to be imposed from outside as an extrinsic motivator is assimilated into how you're going to actually manage that change. And I would say again, you know, if you're doing something brilliant, shout about it, shout loud, shout often, and control the balance the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation that way. And just picking up on something I heard, I picked up from what Maxine was saying about, you know, not everybody wants to do this. I think that's a really good point. Not everybody will go with you on that, and if they don't, I don't think that means that your change has failed. I think that's just another element of the change you have to manage. And if the best you can get from those people is they won't actively sabotage you, then that's a win in my book. You know, if you can keep people neutral, that's brilliant. And it doesn't mean you failed if the whole of your team aren't with you. It's brilliant if they are, but it happens rarely, I feel.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Carol. Yeah. It's Helen. So I'm going to move us on now, if that's okay. But really appreciated, you know, everybody's input into that, and please keep the chat going, because it's really, really fantastic. So just moving forward in terms of the you know, our topics, we want to move on now to the topic of energy. So earlier we looked at this, you know, we talked about this data from Leading Large Scale Change, a Practical Guide, and what we said is that the reality is that most large-scale change efforts, they run out of energy, they simply fade away. And so I think, this energy topic is really important for us in health and care, because, when we look at, for instance, at the financial situation we're in, going forward, we're not in a situation where we have a financial blip now and, in a couple of years, things are going to get great and we're going to go into growth again. It isn't going to happen for a long time. So how do we, as change agents, keep our energy for the long haul? So I think actually having a focus on energy, organisational energy, energy for change is really important. In the study guide for this lecture, we've included the research paper that we commissioned on energy for change, and there are some really great references in there. And Bruce and Vogel are two of the kind of leading researchers in the world on this topic of energy. And their research shows that if we think about any other factor affecting an organisation, whether or not we are able to build energy can either lead to, creating this amazing kind of corporate vitality, or it can actually lead to the destruction of an organisation. And there's also some really great data around the importance of focus on organisational energy and the difference that it can make. And again, just going back to the Bruce and Vogel research, what they found overall is that organisations that have got a high productive energy, they scored higher than other organisations on every dimension of performance. So actually, even thinking from an extrinsic point of view, and wanting to build performance of our organisations, there's a lot of data that shows focusing on energy and building energy is a really smart strategy. So this is the work that we commissioned just over a year ago on building and aligning energy for change, and we commissioned this from York Health Economics Consortium and Landmark, and the link for this paper is in your study guide. And basically what York and Landmark did was to look very comprehensively through the evidence base and literature, including the grey literature, which is the kind of practitioner side of things, around energy for change. And the way that we are defining energy as a result of this work that we did is the capacity of a team and its drive, okay, to take action and make the difference necessary to achieve its goals. So when today we have a module which is about making change happen, actually I think this definition is very helpful. Okay? And this applies at the level of a team, it can apply at the level of an organisation, it can apply at the level of a system or community. And the model that we're using is one where we have identified 5 different energies: social, spiritual, psychological, physical and intellectual energy. And that's why we call it the SSPPI energy index. And what I'd like to do now is just really briefly take you through the 5 energies. And in doing this, think about your own organisation, your own team, think about where the energy is. So the first energy is social energy. And this is the kind of energy that is about people engaging, relationships, connecting, partnerships. So if, for instance, our topic is integrated care, to be able to support integrated care effectively, we need to have a lot of social energy. And when social energy is high, people feel a sense of like us and us. And when social energy is low, it's us and them. Spiritual energy is the kind of energy that is about connecting to a bigger purpose. It's about having a vision of the future that we're all moving towards. And when we've got high spiritual energy, what will happen is that people will feel more confident and supported to move towards that different future. The third energy is psychological energy. And this is a very personal energy. And it's about individuals having courage, feeling safe, feeling resilient, feeling brave to do things differently. And again, when people have got high psychological energy, they feel much more supported to make the change. They trust their leaders. Okay. Physical energy is the energy of implementation, action, making things happen, getting them done. And finally, intellectual energy is the kind of energy that is rational, logical. It's about having effective planning systems. It's about evaluation, thinking things through on the basis of logic and evidence. Now, we've been working with this framework for over a year now, and we've got over 1,000 respondents in health and care. Which of these 5 energies do you think is most dominant, okay, in health and care? Let you put something. Okay, what do others think? Okay. So far, I think intellectual has it, closely followed by physical, and that's actually what our results show. Okay. So what you tend to get in healthcare organisations, and particularly healthcare delivery organisations, is an over-focus or a dominance of intellectual energy and less spiritual and social energy. And the thing about intellectual energy and why it's a problem is because intellectual energy is not transformational. You know, intellect to intellect keeps us in our comfort zone. And I see it so many times, like in my travels around England. You know, it's like, this is our cost and quality plan, and we've got to take £27 million out of our budget in the next 12 months. And we're going to do that by improving quality and making things safer for our patients. So here's how we're going to do it. Here's our objective. Here's our work stream. Here's what the accountabilities are. It's kind of pure and classic intellectual energy. But what we also see very often is a very toxic combination between physical and intellectual energy. And what that means is, you know, here's the plan. It's got to be implemented. You're accountable. Right, off you go. Do it. Make it happen now. And what we really want to do is we want to build all the energies. And what's interesting about psychological energy is it's very impacted by the others. So where social energy and spiritual energy are both low, psychological energy tends to be low because people don't feel supported. They don't feel they're moving to a different future, and so, you know, are less willing to engage in change. And again, you know, what you can see here are the kind of highs and lows. So when social energy is low, people feel very isolated. And again, I'm not going to innovate when I feel very isolated. When social energy is high, there's a real sense of solidarity. On these modules, I've been really struck by how high the social energy is in this community of School for Health and Care Radicals. Okay. When spiritual energy is low, I don't feel committed to the organisation and what it's trying to do or its direction. I just don't connect with it. But when spiritual energy is high, I feel a real sense of higher purpose and a direction we're trying to go in. When psychological energy is low, then it's like, you know, why put my head above the parapet? Why take a risk? You know, innovation tends to be not very prevalent in situations of low psychological energy. Where psychological energy is high, you know, I feel very safe to make change. Where physical energy is low, then there's like a sense of fatigue. It's very hard to do things. Where physical energy is high in a positive way, there's a lot of vitality. And finally, intellectual energy. When intellectual energy is low, it's like, why are we making this decision? You know, it's like ridiculous. You know, I really can't understand, you know, where's the data backing this up? But when intellectual energy is high, there's a real sense of reason and logic and thinking things through effectively. Now, if you go on to the Change Model website, there are some really fantastic resources there for working with the energy index. Now, one of the things that we do is that we look at energy profiles, okay, and we have an online questionnaire that enables teams and organisations to look at their energy for change based on particular change initiatives. And I'll get this right about the spider diagram this time. So where you know, where we're low here on a particular one, then that means that energy is low. But where we're on a 4 or 5, it means that energy is high. And what it enables us to do is to say, you know, where are our energies and which ones are dominant and where do we want our energies to be? So I'm just going to show you a couple of examples to see what you think. Okay, this is very classic large teaching hospital kind of assessment, okay, where intellectual and physical energy are high, okay, because, but social and spiritual energy are low. We don't have a sense of, with the spiritual energy, Mark in the chat box was talking about the importance of the why. You know, why are we doing this? What is our bigger purpose here? Where we're focusing more on the what and how and not on the why, spiritual energy tends to be low. And we don't kind of trust each other. You know, there's a lot of silo working. Where social and spiritual energy are low, psychological energy tends to be low. And this example here is based on a team of community clinicians. Okay? And in this particular team, what you can see is that social energy is really high, because this is a mature team who have worked together for a very long time. And because social energy is high, psychological energy is high, because we've got trusting relationships. But, you know, there's not a strong sense of direction, and we have to question the basis on which we're making decisions. But again, what's helpful about this is that it gets us to think in a different way. So if we think back, you know, when we've got examples of provider organisations who have got very high intellectual and physical energy and low on social and spiritual, then it enables us to facilitate a very different kind of conversation that's helpful. So think about your own organisation and your own setting, and think about, where's the energy? I really like this quote from Henry Mintzberg. Leadership's not about making clever decisions and doing bigger deals for our organisations. It's about helping release the positive energy, you know, the intrinsic motivation that exists naturally within people. And I'd say there's never been a time in the history of health and care when this advice has been more pertinent. So the last topic we wanted to cover today was about building shared purpose. And just starting off with this quote from Edgar Schein, who is like a guru when it comes to organisational thinking and organisational development. You know, and he says you can't impose anything on anyone and expect them to be committed to it. And I think when you look back in the last kind of 10 or 15 years in health and care, there's a lot of evidence of imposition. And I think it's really helpful to think about what's our approach to change. You know, is it based on commitment, or is it based on compliance? So maybe let's start off with compliance. When we've got a compliance-based approach to change, we say this is the minimum performance standard that everybody needs to achieve. So this is like the performance goal or the performance target. How we coordinate and control is we use the hierarchical system, we use performance management system, holding people to account, we use standardization. And the thing about compliance is that if we don't comply, then there are consequences. So there's threats of penalties, financial or otherwise, sanctions, shame for individual leaders. When it comes to commitment, we start from a completely different place. We say, this is a collective goal that everyone can aspire to, whoever we are. You know, whether we're a patient, we're a family member, we're a member of the community, we're a frontline member of staff, we're a chief executive. You know, this is what unites us. So we coordinate and control through shared goals, shared values, a sense of shared purpose. And it's the commitment to that common purpose linked in with our intrinsic motivation that creates an energy for delivery. If we look at the history of large-scale change, okay, there's really no evidence of any organisation that has delivered and sustained large-scale change through compliance, although I think quite a few have tried. And when we look at the case studies of organisations that have been able to transform, you know, been able to deliver really big change, what we see time and time again is it happens on the basis of commitment. Now, in our world of health and care, we need both. You know, we cannot deliver safe, high-quality health and care without strong compliance. But if we can get the commitment right first, you know, if we understand why we're making the change, okay, and we're committed to that why, it's so much of an easier environment for compliance mechanisms, because people understand why we're doing it. So, you know, shared purpose is at the heart of our change model, and it's not surprising. And again, as part of the setup for the change model, we worked with 100 teams and got them to look retrospectively at their change efforts. And of all the 8 components of the change model, shared purpose was the component that people said, if I had my time again, I would spend more time doing this. We would spend more time on shared purpose. But you know, when we live in a world that's dominated by intellectual and physical energy, what we start doing is, this is our improvement, and we rush straight into making change happen, and we don't reflect on shared purpose, and we don't build shared purpose. And I really love this quote from Nilufer Merchant, and she says, having shared purpose allows many communities to engage with us without having to invest resources into controlling their action. And again, when we live in a world that's high compliance, you know, we have to build lots of systems and create lots of jobs that are about ensuring that people comply. Okay? When we focus on commitment and it's about shared purpose, there's almost like, it's almost magnetic, the way in which kind of people organise around it. And again, the evidence backs us up really strongly, you know. Shared purpose is a common thread in many successful change programs, and what we see is that organisations and specific change initiatives where there's really strong shared purpose and the shared purpose remains throughout the life of the change, they constantly outperform those without it. So when it comes to being a successful change program, you know, it's an absolute prerequisite. You know, when we talk about it, it's our shared purpose, and all 3 words are important. The our is important. So, you know, who is defining the benefit that we're trying to achieve from the change? Whoever's defining it needs to be part of the our. Okay? Who's going to make it happen? Who's going to be impacted by the change? All those people need to be part of defining it. Secondly, it's a shared purpose. And again, it goes back to module 2, you know, that, you know, what unites us? There are many things that differentiate us or tear us apart. So, you know, what brings us together? And finally, we have the purpose. And this is the, you know, why are we doing this? What's the bigger purpose? And very much linking that with spiritual energy. What's the future that we're trying to create? Why are we doing that? So when you think about our shared purpose, you know, you get a sense of lots of social energy, lots of spiritual energy. Of all the quotes on shared purpose, this is my favourite one from Seth Carguilio. And he says, shared purpose goes way deeper than talking about organisational vision or mission. He says it goes right into your gut and taps some part of your primal self. And he says, I believe that if you can bring people with a similar primal purpose together and get them marching in the same direction, amazing things can be achieved. And I talked earlier about flow, you know, when we really get it right with intrinsic motivations for change. Okay, it's that same feeling. Okay, last really big point I want to make about this. We talked earlier about how as leaders we're signal generators and we're sending messages out all the time about what's important. Okay, what I see constantly happening, and it's a really big problem around health and care, is that rather than focusing on our shared purpose, our bigger purpose, because we're sending messages all the time about the kind of things that are important, our colleagues and our teams hear that message, and we end up displacing our shared purpose by a de facto purpose. And a de facto purpose is something like hitting a target, reducing cost, in a hospital setting, reducing length of stay, eliminating waste and unwarranted variation, completing our activities or achieving our activity goals within a timescale, complying with an inspection regime. And the problem we have is if our purpose, our shared purpose, isn't explicit, it's very easy for something else to be seen as the purpose, And we cannot deliver radical, large-scale transformational change when we have a de facto purpose. Okay? Really final thing I want to say. One of my big friends on Twitter is this person here. He's at Simon J. Guilfoyle, and somebody I would really recommend following. Simon is a police inspector, a jobbing police inspector, and he's also a systems thinker. And he's invented this, okay? And it's called the Purpose Obfuscation-ometer. And what happens is, at one end, you know, we feed in here, what is the true shared purpose, and what comes out of the other end is the de facto purpose. So I'll just give you 3 examples of this, okay? The first one is the police, and obviously Simon's a police officer, so this is why we get a police example. And you know, the true shared purpose, you know, the citizen said, please catch the person who burgles my house. What comes out the other end is the de facto purpose. We can only afford another 4.3 burglaries per day for the rest of the month, otherwise we'll miss the reduction target. Okay, education, you know, the parent, the shared purpose. I want my child to learn, to get all the opportunities of learning. What comes out the other end? The de facto purpose. Schools should be linked in league tables according to the proportion of students who receive exam results at grades A to C. And of course, it never happens in health and care. So this example here is from the emergency room. You know, the patient comes to the emergency room and with an emergency healthcare situation. Help me to get better. What the machine hears, okay? What comes out the other end, the de facto purpose. 95% and 95th percentile of accident and emergency patients must be admitted, discharged or transferred within 4 hours of arrival in the emergency department, okay? And we keep doing this constantly. So if there's anything that we must be doing as change agents, you know, is that we must be fighting off the forces of de facto purpose and embracing shared purpose. And very finally, this quote from Dov Seidman, it was not written for health and care, but it could have been. The last era of management in health and care was about how much performance we could extract from people. The next is all about how much humanity we can inspire. And I think, you know, that's our core message as health and care radicals moving forward. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to hand over to Jenny.
Thank you very much, Helen. And I'd like to issue a really warm welcome to Deborah Barras, who is out there in Los Angeles. And anybody who's on last week's call will know that we ran out of time, and Deborah was going to be our last panelist. And even though it was the middle of the night, we didn't get to talk to her. So she's on first today, and she's really kindly agreed to help us. So Deborah, quick hello, are you there, and can we hear you?
Hello, everybody.
Hey, yay. We're so glad you're there. So Deborah, welcome. What I'd like you to do, Deborah, is tell us a little bit about how you've seen Energy for Change in action in a change initiative, either something you're working on at the moment or... Oh, are you? Okay.
Yes, that's
I'm going to come
better.
close to the microphone. Okay, so tell us how you've seen Energy for Change in action in a change initiative you're working on at the moment or have recently worked on. Oh, Deborah, you are muted, so you need to just there you go.
There we go. Perfect. Okay, great. Hi. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I have thought quite a bit about which change initiatives I would refer to in speaking with you. I've worked on a number of very large change initiatives. And one that came to mind was one where I was asked to lead a large change initiative to produce workforce optimization within a very large organization, and particularly to create collaborative interprofessional teams throughout an organization that was going through massive change. And there was a lot of cynicism and negativity about the success of any kind of change initiative within the organization. And particularly what I noticed was that relationships were fragmented, and it was it took a lot of work, really, to build up the sense among people that this project would go somewhere. And then the other thing that the participants were concerned about throughout the health system, really, was that the participation in the project would take them away from direct patient care when they already felt that they were overworked. And so what I noticed was that, you know, in terms of the model that we've been talking about, the psychological energies were really quite low, and I was able to create a team by identifying the key departments that needed to be involved in the initiative, getting key people involved, and then really working to build their energy in the project. And that came about by making sure that we used a collaborative approach where the participants on the planning team had the opportunity to really contribute to what were the priorities that we needed to pay attention to in order to meet our outcomes on time. And they got to help drive the processes that we would use. And there was, you know, so we weren't just speaking about collaborative interprofessional practice. We were really living it. And people had this experience of of alignment with their values as well as the organizational priorities. And I think what I noticed over the course of the project was this really, there was this growth in courage and resilience among the participants. So whether they were physicians or nurses or OD professionals, the energy around the project grew over the course of the project. Now, as they'd feared, the project was aborted before we were able to go into implementation. But I promised the group that we would deliver tools and products on an ongoing basis as we worked on the project, so that even if it did get aborted prematurely, they would still have something that they could take away with them, so that they wouldn't have that feeling that they'd wasted their time on yet another failed project. And I think that that really went a long way towards getting involvement from people in the project, people who would otherwise have been too busy.
Okay, that's really interesting, Deborah, and a lovely example. Now, I'm guessing that you didn't know about the Energy for Change content when you were doing that piece of work, and you've kind of had a look, you kind of retrofitted. Yeah, okay. And just talk to me a little bit about how you can see the potential for it in the work you're doing now and going forward from here.
I really enjoyed the spider model, the spider web model. I hadn't seen that before. And thinking about balancing energies in the way that this framework allows will help me to make sure that we can work on those areas where we need to increase the level of energy that people have. I think that, you know, what I'm noticing in many of the people that I'm working with right now is that we're higher in social energy, for example, or the psychological energy, even the spiritual energy, but lower in others. And so I'm going to want to work to raise that.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, I would think that Energy for Change is probably a new concept to lots of the people on the call. So there are some brilliant resources available on the NHS Improving Quality website. No, hang on, Helen's shaking her head. Helen, just say it.
Yeah. All the energy resources are on the Change Model website. And so, and again, the reference to that is on these slides and also in your study guide. And there are some really fantastic resources there, including the opportunity to do the online questionnaire as well.
Yeah, and we can help you to facilitate that. So if anybody needs help, then do please get in touch. Deborah, thank you so much. And Sebastian, I'm just going to put you on red alert because I'm going to come to you in just a moment. So are you going to bed now, Deborah, or what are you doing? Because it's really, really late tonight.
In about an hour.
Okay, you'll need, maybe have a cup of tea to wind down afterwards, but thank you so much. And you. Sebastian, are you with us?
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Hello, and I think you're a little closer. Tell us where you are.
I'm currently in Nuneaton, in the sun.
Yeah, so you're actually... lovely. Well, we, Helen and Pip and I are in Coventry in the sun, so very nice to hear from you too.
We're just next door.
Yeah. So, Sebastian, what I'd like to focus this little bit of discussion on is the concept of shared purpose, and just to really hear from you how you've used that concept, because I know you've done lots of work with this, but to help you engage other people in a change that you've been working on.
Okay, I'm going to describe the pediatric asthma pathway that we are working on. I was working with Hisham Abdallah over the last couple of years in a previous organization, and it draws on many of the concepts we've been talking about today. So asthma is a common condition in childhood, and 75% of admissions are preventable. And our current model is we are very reactive, and we give very high quality care to a child when they turn up in the emergency department. But a lot of this can be prevented if we work in schools, with families, with GPs, to empower children and prevent asthma. So the first part of the project was actually more emergent, and we built on people who maybe naturally had a shared purpose. So this was people who work with children with asthma directly. It was working in schools. It was working with families. And we built quite a wide coalition of people who were passionate and volunteered and came to meetings in the evening, and that worked really well. So we then were accepted by the King's Fund as part of the Patient and Family-Centred Care Programme, and Helen Baxter, who's on the call, was our mentor, and she gave us fabulous support. And what we then had to do was to try and, I mean, patient and family-centred care really is about shadowing the family, really understanding what their needs are, and working together to co-produce better experience-based care, and then implement that using Model for Improvement. One of the problems we had was moving from being outward-facing outside our organisation, working with GPs and families, health visitors, school nurses, parents, public health, and this programme was really inside the organisation. Inside the organisation, they were focused on becoming Foundation Trust, about saving money, about decreasing admissions, and actually we really struggled, or I really struggled, and so although we tried to build shared purpose through working with them to share how this could improve performance or improve staff morale, we really struggled. So I think this process slowed down, and to some extent it was only when the extrinsic drivers kicked in, some of the performance management, that got the trust more actively engaged with us. In retrospect, I think that had we moved more quickly, delivered small wins earlier, I think that would have created maybe more visible, tangible benefits for the organisation that would have then have supported.
It's really interesting hearing you talk about that, because it's making me think, back to some of our earlier materials from the modules. You kind of clearly went where the energy was initially, but then actually probably the Energy for Change model might have helped you think through your approach in quite a different way in terms of meeting all of those different energies. And did you get to shared purpose, do you think? I think we did in the end. I'm not sure we achieved the impact that we had hoped for, but I think that we certainly got some way towards it. But I think shared purpose is fundamental to everything. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us now. I'm going to very briefly hand over now to Tony, first of all, for a very brief Twitter summary, please, Tony.
Great, very briefly. Sharing all the stories, sharing experiences of change, no matter how small, so we can all learn from everyone else. Energy, the need to balance the energies in a team. Can't just have one sort, can't have two sorts. It needs to be balanced so that we don't get too close to the spider in the middle of the problem. Some really good community building, sharing a playlist, demonstrating that we're building a sharing of experiences and values. So great playlist going to be up there on Spotify real soon now, and some really good sharing of resources, Goanda, Mintzberg, and some other stuff, but also some themes coming through about compliance, and I think as someone said, and shame versus commitment and responsibility, which is really showing up the problem, I think, of infantilization of staff by a patriarchal hierarchy.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Interesting stuff. And Liz, over to you. I know we can all read the chat, but your insights and summaries are always really fab, so off you go.
Thanks, Jenny. But very briefly, lots of resonance around the intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. Quite some really good discussion around resilience. People loved the energy model, and particularly the concept of psychological energy. And again, more sharing of resources, lots and lots of references. So we'll collate all of that and pass that out to everybody.
Brilliant, thank you, Liz. And one of the things I'm just loving about all of the participation is that people really are making linkages, not just between the individuals and people on the calls, but also between the materials from all the different modules. It's lovely to see that coming alive in those conversations. So I'm going to hand over to Jackie now, who's going to start the wrap-up for us.
Okay, thank you very much, Jenny. It was a fascinating module today. It was great, and 4 sort of things that came out for me were, you know, we are all signal generators, and what's really important to us is really what comes through us as signal generators. So I just think that that's a great reminder for all of us, wherever we are in the system. I think quite a lot has been said about intrinsic and extrinsic factors. And I never fail, every time I hear a discussion about that, you know, really the importance of ensuring that we have that balance between recognising both. I love the example of the person who gave the vehemently opposed person to change, and then, you know, not writing that person off, and that that person can become advocates, and they can neutralise change. I really love that.
Jackie, I'm just going to interrupt very briefly. We're struggling to hear you, so can you just get a bit closer to your microphone, please?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now?
That's much better.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to go over that again because I realise time is of the essence. And then the last point was about shared purpose. That shared purpose is the heart of the change model, and it's also the heart of change. And so I also love that quote that Helen gave about shared purpose, that it goes into the guts. It's that primal purpose, and it's amazing when we can create that and ensure that people are all marching in the right direction. So I just thought it was a great module today. Really, really lovely conversation. And so I'd like to call you to action in terms of our campaigns for this week. If you go onto the change model, the link is there on the slide, and there are three calls to action there that you can use. I'm not going to go through them for time's sake, but use one of those or use your own to join one of the campaigns. And I'd just like to thank everybody for a great conversation today. And I'd like to pass you back over to Helen.
Hi there. So, in terms of next opportunities for learning, our next opportunity, which is optional, is next Wednesday, the Tweet Chat, which will be about making change happen and the topics that we've been talking about today. You know, I think the Tweet Chats are getting better and better. Next Friday, we have our very last module. Gosh, it's gone so quickly. And this is, we're going to do some leading edge, interesting things around moving beyond the edge. And then the other thing I think is really important and I'm very excited about is when Naomi's news comes out today, what we're going to have is the details of how you can start the process of becoming a certificated change agent. And basically what's going to happen, just really quickly, we're going to give you the opportunity to become a certificated change agent, and you will get the status of a certificated change agent if you do the work, and you can also use it to claim your continuing professional development points from your Royal College or professional association. And basically, there's a few things that you need to do. It's very straightforward, but basically you need to take the learning from the 5 modules, show how you can apply it to the implementation of your pledge for Change Day in less than 1,000 words, and then send it in to us. We will assess it, and then if you get through this process, you'll be recognised as a certified change agent by the School for Health and Care Radicals and NHS Improving Quality. We will award you a virtual badge that you can use on your email signature, put it on your personal website. We're going to run some virtual graduation ceremonies, and if you live in the UK, we will send you a framed certificate. So we hope that lots of you will choose to do this. And you know, you don't have to have been on the live modules. Anybody that's kind of sat and listened to the 5 and does this bit of work afterwards can become a certificated change agent. So, finally, tips.
Helen. Just really to leave you all with a few encouragements, I think, to think about what we've heard today and to invite you to really deeply consider the kinds of suggestions and comments you've been making in the chat boxes. It's kind of interesting how often we see ourselves as outside the comments we're making. So I think the invitation to you is to really consider how you can bring some of what you've been talking about into your lives and the lives of the people you work with. So, and do also please take a look at the study guide where there are a few different things and a few invitations and provocations for you to think about how you can apply what you've been hearing about to your own work. But we'd really like you to think about how you can make the most of both intrinsic and extrinsic agents of change, how you can actually do that with your own people in your own lives, because it is quite interesting when you actually start to apply it to yourself. How are you going to build energy for the long haul? There were lots of comments about energy and how depleted energy can get after a long time. So what can you actually do to take steps to ensure that you can sustain your own energy and the people and the energy of the people you work with? What are you going to do to ensure shared purpose throughout the entire change process? And again, there was a lot of talk about kind of updating the story, but what are you going to do in your own life and your own work? And finally, just give some thought to what small thing you could do tomorrow that would accelerate change. So I hope you've all enjoyed the session today. I hope you'll have really good weeks. We look forward to seeing you next week.